Just because the person to your left is experiencing survivor's guilt doesn't mean that you're going to or meant to. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I really want to stress that survivor's guilt is not a standard of survivorship. It doesn't make you any less than if you don't experience it.
Welcome to the Cancer Pod. A cancer diagnosis doesn't just change your body. It can shatter your sense of who you are, leaving you grieving a version of yourself that no longer exists. And for some, survival itself brings an unexpected burden: guilt. Today, we welcome back psychotherapist Natasha Ewa, a licensed clinical social worker who brings over a decade of clinical experience to her practice, I Thrive Therapy and Wellness. But Natasha's insight runs deeper than her training. She founded her practice in 2019, right after completing her own treatment for breast cancer. Now, she works with people navigating diagnosis, active treatment, and life after cancer, helping them to process the complex emotions that can arise when everything changes. Welcome back to the Cancer Pod, Natasha.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me again.
Yeah, last time that you were a guest, we talked about PTSD, grief, and then we even delved into talking about death. And this time, I had approached you because someone approached me about having an episode talking about survivor's guilt. And I was like, definitely need an expert for this. And so you were the first person I thought of. So I would love for us to start off talking about that and then maybe shift into talking about grief that we feel about ourselves and maybe our bodies being different. So what is survivor's guilt?
What is survivor's guilt? So essentially, and for all the listeners, I'm sick at the moment, so I sound pretty nasally. Survivor's guilt. It's exactly as it sounds. It is the overwhelming guilty feeling or feelings of guilt that overwhelm a person who has survived. And survivor's guilt is something that a person can feel whether they have survived cancer, whether they have survived a horrific car accident, or anything in between, knowing that there are other people in this world who have had the same or similar experience who did not survive. And the overwhelming feeling is typically categorized by kind of that bargaining and asking questions. Why me? It should have been me. This person didn't deserve it. Maybe I deserve to no longer be here. And so there's that internal bargaining that happens. For some individuals, that bargaining happens with their higher power. It happens with asking God, why did you have to take them instead of taking me? Or, some individuals, there are folks that I have worked with who in the past did not feel like they were a good person, which is why they ended up in therapy. And then they were diagnosed with cancer. So their belief system is that it should have been them. They're the ones that should have succumbed to breast cancer because I was never a good person anyway. And so their survivor's guilt is attached to that experience that came even before cancer. And so again, it's someone who has survived something horrific, something traumatic, and they have thoughts. Sometimes those thoughts are pervasive, meaning they basically sit there at all times. And sometimes the thoughts are fleeting. It's triggered by watching something in a movie, or it's triggered by someone that passing away from cancer. Whichever it is, it's an overwhelming feeling of guilt that you are questioning why the other person succumbed to this, and sometimes why it wasn't you.
Is this something common amongst cancer survivors, do you find?
Yeah, survivor's guilt is something that is common amongst those who have been touched by cancer. I say it's twofold. It's common, kind of generally speaking, because most cancer survivors are going to feel it at some point here and there. But survivor's guilt isn't necessarily something for all cancer survivors that is pervasive. So, in other words, it's not something that they're always going to feel. It's not something that they're going to feel at the onset of their diagnosis all the way through to being done with active treatment. Some individuals might start to feel survivor's guilt years later down the line. Some may experience survivor's guilt for 2 weeks, whilst someone else experiences survivor's guilt for 2 to 5 years, and they just can't shake that feeling. So a lot of individuals will experience survivor's guilt. Some individuals will experience it pervasively. Others will experience it very fleeting. And then some individuals honestly don't experience survivor's guilt at all. And it doesn't mean that they don't care. It doesn't mean that they don't feel something for those who have succumbed to breast cancer. Um, but I do want to add that, one of the things that I have learned and discovered over the years, both in my personal life as well as in my practice, is that those who have been touched by cancer are often under the impression that they are supposed to experience survivor's guilt. And so what will happen with those individuals is they will kind of attach that thought, that feeling, that way of thinking, they'll attach it to their story, and they will tell themselves that they're experiencing survivor's guilt when maybe they actually are not, but they are afraid to be seen or be perceived as someone who is almost too ecstatic that they survived while someone else did not. And that doesn't seem to feel right. It doesn't really settle right for some individuals. And so I need to feel some sort of guilt, right? Because I'm still here and someone else isn't. And so again, then they attach that feeling or that experience to their story.
I had shared with you before we started recording that I don't think that I experienced survivor's guilt. Again, I worked throughout my treatment and for several years after at a cancer center with cancer patients.
Mhm.
I don't feel like I'm any less compassionate because of it. It was just something that I never even thought of until I started reading more people posting about it. So this is why I'm really curious about not only, what it is, why it develops, but also what can people do? Obviously, seeing a therapist could be helpful for someone if it's lasting for a long period of time.
Right.
So when would somebody know that maybe you should go talk to somebody about what you're feeling?
Yeah, that's a great question. So survivor's guilt is not problematic. Just like having trauma responses are not problematic, just like getting angry isn't problematic. It becomes problematic when it starts to impair your ability to do day-to-day things, right? Or your ability to connect. So I would say that it's time to go and see someone if your survivor's guilt is telling you that you are less than and that you shouldn't be here. You don't deserve to be here. There is no reason for you to be here. It intercepts, it gets in the way of you being able to kind of rediscover yourself after cancer. It gets in the way of you being able to look in a mirror and say, I'm here and I'm okay with that. Now, when a person is actively in the midst of feeling that survivor's guilt, those questions are going to be asked. But if you're carrying it into the next day, if you're carrying it into bed with you, if you're carrying it to the grocery store, then at that point, probably should talk to someone, because that means that you are not able to separate the fact that you feel guilty versus you are actually telling yourself it should be you and you're believing it, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Um, Again, going back to some individuals, it's a pervasive thing. That's when you should be talking to someone versus it's fleeting. It comes and goes, and it's triggered by watching someone or learning of, a fellow breastie's passing. You feel it for whether it's a few minutes to a few hours to maybe even a few days, but you're not feeling it for months on end consistently. That's when, if that's what someone is feeling, you should be speaking with someone. And talk therapy, psychotherapy is wonderful, but I would also encourage, in addition to that, doing something physical, somatic work, dancing, swimming, something in addition to the talking, because a lot of times the guilt that we feel is just embedded into our physical space, into our physical being, not just our thoughts. And so making sure that you have a little bit of both is going to be helpful.
So, survivor's guilt is a natural response then. And so, anyone who experiences it, you're going through Instagram and you follow cancer people and you see that someone who you've maybe messaged back and forth or commented on their posts that they've passed. If you're experiencing survivor's guilt learning of their passing and then it goes away after a few hours, a couple days,
Mhm.
then that's okay. That's a normal response.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Um, Granted, it's different. I liken it to, imagine getting into a car accident and you somehow you break a bone, you break a femur. You're supposed to be upset to a degree, maybe a little bit afraid, maybe you're scared that you might need surgery. You're supposed to go through all of these motions or emotions, and some emotions are going to be stronger than others. Some are going to last a little bit longer than others. Where it becomes an interference is even post surgery or after life has kind of continued to move on, you are still in that space. And now we might be looking at PTSD, where it's this recurring feeling of that fear and that guilt with and without triggers. And so you are unable to separate, right, those experiences. But in short, absolutely, it's a very natural response. I mean, we're all humans first and foremost. And what makes us human is that we have feelings, right? And it's a totally different conversation, but even if we're talking about individuals who have been studied to have very limited feelings, there's still some sort of response that occurs. It just may not be appropriate, but there's still some sort of response that occurs. And so, yes, it is an absolutely natural response to have.
And what I think is unusual and special with at least the breast cancer community is that we do establish friendships with complete strangers over
Yeah.
this common diagnosis. And I'm sure it happens with other cancer groups, people with colon cancer or stomach cancer. They're all bonding. We're bonding with these complete strangers with this common
Yeah.
thread.
Yeah.
And so we form these connections with people that we may never meet in person.
Mhm.
And so does that play a part, perhaps, that having this relationship with someone and it's not a
Mhm.
total stranger, it's not like it's a celebrity, somebody that's
Right.
untouchable. You've communicated, you've identified with this
Right.
other person, but you're not able to be there physically for someone
Mm.
in perhaps a time when they might need people around them. I mean, would
Yeah.
that play a part as well, or am I just kinda going off in another
Um,
direction?
no, it absolutely can. It absolutely can. Proximity is not something that has to be present for survivor's guilt, right? It doesn't have to be someone that you've known for 20 years. It can be someone that you've literally known honestly for 2 hours. The guilt ensues because you are looking at them and then you are comparing their story to yours. That's where the guilt comes in. So, you like you said, and I think it's such a beautiful thing that we are able to connect and build these communities in the way that we do. But what also can come with that is the frequency of having survivor's guilt can increase because you are a part of the community. Right. And so I imagine after my breast cancer diagnosis, if I intentionally chose to just stay out of all breast cancer communities, I'm less likely to see and hear and face the stories of breasties passing away. I'm going to know that it's happening, but it's not going to be on the forefront. Right. It's not going to be something that's right there. Someone's not going to message me that news, or it'll be quite infrequent. And so when you become a part of a community that is specific to the very thing that you are feeling, you are going to feel that very thing more frequently because it's almost like it's in your home. It's a part of your home now. And so are you likely to open that door? Or is it likely to come knocking? Whichever it is, the frequency is a lot higher than if you were not a part of such community. I would love to add that, and we touched on this a little bit, but I want to stress that if someone doesn't experience guilt, it's okay. It's not something you have to push or force or go looking for. Guilt is something that we're going to feel for various reasons throughout our lives, but it doesn't have to be associated with cancer. And just because the person to your left is experiencing survivor's guilt doesn't mean that you're going to or meant to. It's if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I really want to stress that survivor's guilt is not a standard of survivorship. It doesn't make you any less than if you don't experience it. And I want to stress that again because one of the patterns I've seen with clients that I've worked with, and I've worked with clients who have had breast cancer, who have brain cancer, who have had stomach cancer, who have had skin cancer, who have had multiple types of cancer. And I have a very particular client that I'm thinking of right now. And she's like, nope, I don't feel guilty. So and so passed away from stomach cancer 48 hours ago. No, I don't feel anything. And she's gotten to the place where she can say, I'm sad, but I don't feel guilty. And I think sometimes we enmesh those two things. And as much as they can go hand in hand, they also can be very separate. Your sadness for someone passing on doesn't have to equate to feeling guilt, whereas at times it can. But it's not like a prerequisite, to being like this bomb ass cancer survivor or anything like that. It's just a thing that you may feel or you may not.
I want to talk also about body image after diagnosis.
Body image.
And I shared with you that right before we logged on, I was watching one of your Instagram videos. I love your Instagram account. And for anyone listening who is not following Natasha, it's Natasha After Cancer. She's on Instagram and TikTok.
Yeah.
And first of all, your videos are beautiful. Your social media manager is doing a fabulous job.
That's me.
I know. That's why I said that. Truly, like your videos are gorgeous and
Thank you.
everything it's like so beautifully put together. And then the information that you're giving is so great. And you documented your experience with a DIEP flap.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And the video that I watched today, you were talking
Yeah.
about how like you finally felt
Good. Yeah.
like you're in your own body.
Yeah. Yeah. It feels amazing. It feels amazing. Body image after breast cancer. It's a journey. It's an extremely layered one. It's a very sensitive body image in general is very sensitive,
Right.
right? So then to add the layer of what I refer to as health trauma, where you had a health experience that led to a series of traumatic moments, whether it's multiple surgeries, chemotherapy. So it's not, cancer isn't this thing where you have cancer and it's that one traumatic moment. The news is traumatic, then the treatment is traumatic, and then the surgeries are traumatic. And like many of us have spoken about, a lot of times for many of us, it's after all of that, that all of a sudden you really feel the fear. Because earlier on, you were blanketed by all these doctor's appointments. You were blanketed by um, actively working on getting rid of the cancer. And now you're told kind of go on and live your life. And instead of seeing you once a week, I'll see you every 3 months or I'll see you every 6 months. And that's when for many of us, it really settles in like, oh, I don't look the way that I once did. I don't feel the way, like I know that I don't feel the way I once did, but now I really know and I actually have to deal with it because I'm not occupied by all of the other moving parts to having had cancer. And our body image for many of us, I can't say all because everyone's different. And there are some women out there that I've spoken to who actually feel better post-cancer than they did before because the surgeries that they have had the opportunities to have made them feel better than what they felt pre-cancer. Now, obviously, they wouldn't choose to go through cancer in order to feel that way, but they can acknowledge that I like what I see in the mirror today, whereas maybe 15 years ago, I did not. And unfortunately, cancer is what got me to this point, but I can acknowledge that I do like what I see in a mirror. But it's very layered. It's very sensitive. It's hard. It's hard because you look in the mirror and let me know if this is, too raw, too much, but you look in a mirror, and I used to say one of my nipples was in the North Pole and the other one was in South Africa, just two completely different directions, and that's just what it was because they remove as much breast tissue as they can. They do all these things to help preserve your life, and you're grateful, but you also don't really love what you see, and you try to love it, and you do certain things to appreciate it, but it's hard. It can be very, very difficult. Very difficult.
And there's that period, I don't know if you experienced this, but when I was in treatment, I felt like time stood still, and it didn't.
Mm,
Time kept moving, but you're in treatment. Even when I was on tamoxifen, I just felt like my world was just kind of holding still. And then one day I looked in the mirror, and granted, I finished treatment in 2015.
yeah,
So I'm, what, 11 years out?
which is amazing.
Thank you. Thanks. But I looked in the mirror and I was like, "Oh my god, I'm old."
Oh,
But I was diagnosed at 47. So yeah,
yeah.
I mean, it's good. I'm glad I'm old, but I just feel like it, for the 10 years on tamoxifen, my
Mm,
time was standing still, but I just kept aging. And then,
mm,
you feel old because perhaps you feel old with arthritis from the estrogen being gone, and
yeah.
you have scars, and then, those that lack of estrogen affects collagen and all
Yes.
of that. And yeah, looking in the mirror and being like, "I don't know this person. This isn't the person
Mm,
that I was before cancer," which is true, I'm
yeah.
not. But it's just for me, a weird feeling. I'm like, I feel like I lost 10 years of my life.
Wow.
So, and we're not here to analyze me, but I don't know if anyone else, maybe someone else feels that way too. But I just feel like, how did I get so old so fast? And I blame the cancer because when in
Mm.
doubt, blame the cancer,
Hey, we'll use the card. Hey.
you know? But yeah, I do. And I started looking at older pictures of myself, and I was just like, what happened to that person? Where did they go?
The interesting thing is you may have been saying the same thing even without cancer. I think what adds to that component or that dynamic is cancer it's very real. It was part of your experience, and so it becomes the thing that helped to accelerate you becoming hypervigilant to the fact that you feel and look different. And hopefully that makes sense
It does.
because we age. It's natural, it's going to happen, it's supposed to happen. It's a beautiful thing that
Mhm.
happens, aging. And as we're talking about, not everyone gets the opportunity to age. But what cancer will often do is make you so hypervigilant because we're all those cracks and the arthritis and the lower pain back and the headaches. We're so hypervigilant to everything that we feel. So you also become super hypervigilant to what you see as well. Like before cancer, I wasn't looking at my skin for potential skin cancer. I wasn't looking at moles in that way. After cancer, I'm looking at everything. Everything. It could be a paper cut, and I'm analyzing it like, "Is this something to be concerned about?" And then you see that paper cut, and you're like, "It looks like the wrinkle up," and you just become super hypervigilant. So, A, you could be saying the same thing even if you hadn't experienced cancer, but B, I just wanna validate that cancer really what it does is it highlights it, underlines it, italicizes it, and becomes this bright factor in why you feel that way.
We do have a saying in my house, it's cancer until proven otherwise,
I know that's right.
and it could be a paper cut. Maybe you didn't remember cutting your finger and you're like, what is this pain in my finger? Or
Yeah,
why do I have this bruise? Like
yeah,
everything
yeah,
becomes,
everything.
like you said, it's pervasive. So I don't want to use the word normal, but it's normal to grieve one's past life, pre-cancer life.
For sure. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And see the thing about grief, right? And I I understand that as human beings, when we grieve something, one of the characteristics of that is the idea that a part of you is no longer accessible And so you're grieving it. So when people think grief, we automatically just think complete loss. Someone has passed on, you no longer have access, physical access to them. Or if we're grieving a part of who we are, I no longer have access to who that person was or the resources that that version of me once had. I can't go back and be her or be him. But honestly, grief can also be that there was a side of you that you actually did not love or like back then, but you're grieving that the way in which you are no longer that person was by way of cancer and not necessarily because of something that you did to work on no longer being that person. So in other words, a person can say to me, Natasha, I used to think that I was a really bad person. I had very little compassion. I was mean. I was rude. I would be condescending. And then I got cancer. And I don't grieve who I used to be. Like, I don't want to be that person. I'm actually very compassionate now, but I grieve the fact that it wasn't a choice in how I became this person. Because I would not have chosen cancer in order to become compassionate. So I'm grieving that there was a process I didn't get to have to become this version that I currently am. So we can also grieve how we got here as well as much as grieving who we once were, or sometimes we grieve who we thought we were going to become, but cancer took us in a completely different direction as well.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So are there things that people can do? Are there practices? You said even movement, dance. I mean, are there specific resources for people who perhaps want to work on body image or, the acceptance of who they are after cancer?
That's a great question. I'm going to be honest and say that it's actually very limited when it comes to body image. And that is because body image is it's something that's extremely individualized. And I say that because how we perceive ourselves is often not just based on what we see in the mirror. It's also based on culture, right? It's also based on what we were taught growing up. So someone might come from a home where they are taught that being very slender is how you should look. That's what healthy looks like. Whereas someone else grows up in a home where they were told you're supposed to be thicker, right? You're supposed to have thighs and you're supposed to have, rounded hips. That's what healthy looks like. And so you end up with cancer and maybe you were en route and then cancer calls a complete switch. And now you're no longer looking like what you were taught you're supposed to look like. So you have to grieve that you may never meet those standards. And then you have to learn to like what you see, knowing that you'll never potentially meet those standards because of the anti-estrogen medications and chemotherapy and radiation and all of those different things. So you almost have to redefine for yourself, which is not the easiest thing to do, but redefine what beauty is for you. And you have to tune out everyone else's version because everyone else's version probably would have landed a lot differently pre-cancer. Whereas post-cancer, it has a completely different effect. Pre-cancer, if I was told that having big breasts was the thing to have, I was not going to meet that beauty standard. Post-cancer, reconstruction to implants. Maybe from appearance-wise on the outside looking in, I meet that. But internally, I don't because I know why I look that way. My breasts are big because I have implants, but I have implants because I had breast cancer and I chose reconstruction. And so having to work through all of those layers will play a role in how we perceive what we see, in the mirror. And then honestly, and I maybe you experience this as well. I have learned that most of us just have lower tolerance for certain things. Whereas maybe before cancer, we wanted to strive to present a very particular way. And after cancer, you're like, this is how I look. And I'm trying to learn to love it. And I'm not going to strive. I'm not going to, bend over backwards or try and kill myself trying to look a certain way when I survived. And I'm just still trying to wrap my head around the fact that I survived something like cancer.
And we kind of have earned the right to look the way that we want to look.
100%. 100%. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I don't recall where I heard this, but it's one of another breastie whose page that I follow, and I know she had reconstruction to implants, and I think she had another reconstruction to implants very recently, kind of around the time that I had my DIEP flap, and she made a comment that really stuck with me, and I'm not gonna say it verbatim because I don't recall exactly what she said, but essentially the message was, "I went through way too much to try and humble myself and not want to feel better in my body. If my breasts are have been amputated and someone says there is an option and I hope that you feel okay and you feel like you look good enough or you feel like you look okay in that option and we have it for you," she said, "I'm going to take it." And she's like, "And I took the biggest set of implants I could get."
Well, like I said, I love that you share your experience with the deep flap, and you have been brutally honest about what you went through, and it was not easy.
It was not easy at all. It was not easy. It was exhausting. It was painful. Um, I never questioned if I'd be okay. I knew that I would be, but in the midst of it, I was exhausted. I was my body was responding in like 30 different ways at the same time. From developing blood clots in my lungs, blood clots in my legs, having stomach issues, having gastro issues, needing blood transfusions, and it was all happening simultaneously. And I was so exhausted. But thankfully, things died down, and I'm so much better. But yeah, and I wanted to be real and raw because and which is it's just me naturally who I am as a person. I like to be very honest. But my philosophy is there are going to be individuals that will share their story softly, and then there are going to be individuals that share their story very raw. And then you let people choose which one they need to help them make the decision that they need to make.
And so all of this, like I said, is documented on your Instagram.
Yes.
You gone back and watched some of those earlier videos when I mean, I remember when I reached out to you when you found out about the blood clots.
Yeah.
And I remember, again, we've never met in person,
Yeah.
but I've interviewed you and we messaged each other. And I remember gasping and like, oh my gosh, like this happened and reaching
Yeah.
out to you, like, how's everything going? I was like,
Yeah.
I think I even told my husband and he's like, who are you talking about? Like, like, oh my gosh. It was, so when you go back and look at this,
Hmm.
how does that make you feel?
I'm so glad it's behind me. I'm so glad it's behind me. In one regard, I was so exhausted with everything that was going on that actually when I learned about the blood clots, I didn't say anything. I just laid there. I just laid there because I had no energy. Like, I just had nothing in me, and so when they came in and my surgeon was shocked. He was just like, "I don't know how this happened. I can't believe this happened. I'm so sorry it happened." And I'm thinking, I mean, you didn't put the blood clots in me, right? This is a risk of surgery. This is no matter what surgery you have, this is something that can happen. So I wasn't I wasn't upset. It was more of, "Ugh, okay, it's another thing." If anything. And similar to what I was saying before, I don't think it really set in that I had the pulmonary embolism until I started feeling better. And then I was like, oh my God, I've got to check if I'm breathing okay. And this is weeks later. I've got to make sure that like I'm not feeling certain things and I have to be super hypervigilant. So it was rough. It was exhausting, but when I look back and I've looked back on a couple of the videos once, and I kind of giggle because I 'cause I'm like, "Wow, I did go through all of that." And it wasn't even that long ago, but in some ways, it feels like it was a while ago.
Without having surgery, without having a pulmonary embolism, just keeping up with social media and keeping your brand going is hard
Mm,
enough. And you're doing
yeah.
it, you're going through all of this. I mean, the videos of you
Wow.
trying to walk after surgery and you were moving and you
Yeah.
documented you're walking kind of hunched over, and then as you slowly started to stand upright, um, it's like I said, I love your account
Thank you.
because you were going through all of this and documenting it and editing it and doing all of it so you could share it with everybody.
I'm very type A. And so the way that my brain works is if I have my mind set on something, I have a hard time stopping until it's complete. And that's something I've been working on. My husband's been helping me with that it's okay to pause in the middle of something sometimes. So, yeah, I get asked that a lot, like, how do I keep up? And then having 2 little boys, and I do a lot of things at night. I do a lot of things at night.
After they're in
Yeah.
bed.
Yes.
But I love that you didn't sugarcoat it and you kept it real, and it's a great resource for anyone who does wanna explore getting a deep flap.
Mhm.
Thank you so much again for joining me
Absolutely.
on the podcast,
Absolutely. It's always a good
and
time.
I'm totally gonna pick your brain off camera about your
Absolutely.
surgery because it is something that I have considered.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah,
Okay.
I guess,
Yeah.
hopefully I said this last time and it did come true, but hopefully we'll have you again on the podcast. And yeah, I wish you the best.
Thank you so much. Likewise.
Thanks for listening to the Cancer Pod. Remember to subscribe, review, and rate us wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on social media for updates. And as always, this is not medical advice. These are our opinions. Talk to your doctor before changing anything related to your treatment plan. The Cancer Pod is hosted by me, Dr. Leah Sherman, and by Dr. Tina Kaiser. Music is by Kevin MacLeod. See you next time.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.